Hi, everyone. Louise here, First Lady of Nutrition on the First Lady of Nutrition podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Erin Elizabeth, who is the health nut news guru. And she was recently featured in the New York Times expose. So welcome to First Lady of Nutrition podcast, Erin.
Thank you, Anne. It's an honor to be here with you. Truly. Thank you.
The honor and pleasure is mine. So what does the New York Times have to do with you? What kind of bone are they picking?
Well, last week after Bobby Kennedy, who I know loves you, after he was taken down off of Instagram with almost 1 million followers, the New York Times did an article asking why his nonprofit page hadn't been taken it down along with his personal page, which had so many followers. And then they also did in the article wrote a couple paragraphs about my site and my page. They even linked to my website, which surprised me, and asked why my Instagram main page and then my smaller backup page, why they weren't taken down. And they didn't go into great detail why they thought I should or shouldn't be, but it was just sad that even the media now, if they get on the case and almost pressure these social media platforms then to take down pages that they just don't want up. And you have to wonder really who, like when I've interviewed Bobby Kennedy, he talks about who's really running the New York Times. I mean, you look at their advertising or who's really in charge, and it's kind of big tech. So it's sad that we have that we see things like this, and that just because of some of the things that he talked about, that they deleted just posts, some of the things he'd written so eloquently would have 500,000 likes, and just it was history in the making, and all of that was deleted permanently, and he's just gone. So
it's rather unbelievable that we're living through this. But how did you become so involved with Health Nut News? Tell me a little bit about your background, because I know very little about you other than you are a wildly popular sensation.
Oh, thank you. So kind. Thank you. Coming from you is again an honor. But I started, I'll just very quickly give a background. I started on air when I was in college or just graduated high school in the late 80s. So not to date myself, but I was at late 80s, and I started on a radio station full time doing news and weather. And I think they thought this teenage young woman wasn't going to do much harm, and I would just report the local news and weather. But I was sent to the local, all the city hall meeting, had to go city hall, go all the meetings. And I found kind of this corruption going on, and, like 18, 19 years old, reported on it. And I actually lost my first job. They said, you can't do that. Those are, I uncovered the corruption, reported about it on the news because they didn't look over what I was going to say prior to going on. And they were horrified, because they wanted me to report on like the latest, we were in a small town in Indiana on the latest, who won the baking contest or something. So I went one step above all of that. And then I worked for a nonprofit, also while in college, and then after graduation, that was a Citizens Action Coalition. So we would work to stop these utility companies, like it's happening now, that are monopolies at these huge rate hikes and just so many of the bad things they were doing. So I worked there for a number of years. And when I also did health retreats for a number of years. So I had the site Raw Foods Retreat. So I don't do that anymore, but I did raw retreats for a number of years where I would bring in speakers from around the world and chefs I learned really quickly were more popular than the speakers because people love chefs. And I did that I'm many years in Palm Coast. It's just up the road here in Florida. And that's how I met Joe, Dr. Mercola, 12 years ago when I was doing the retreats, because long story short, he got an invite or something and wrote me about it. And I don't know if you know this story, but just real quickly, just before my birthday, and he said, hey, I got an invite to one of your retreats, and he said, I can't make it, but I saw your website and I know a little bit about nutrition and technology. And he said, I could actually think I'd like to help you fix a few things. Your site needs a little, a few changes. So think of it as an early birthday gift. So just let me know, Joe. So that's,
I love that story.
I feel like I manifested him because I had not 2 weeks earlier written on my aunt's site that, we don't think always alike politically, but she had posted one of his stories. And I was like, oh, Aunt Elisa, I love Dr. Mercola. I said, he's from Chicago like I am. And I said, I hope really hope one day that to meet him. That would be a dream of mine. And then 2 weeks later, this happened. And I thought it was a joke the whole day. I thought I kept looking. I thought this looks like a real profile, but somebody has written me as Dr. Mercola, not knowing I had followed him since 2001, not the start. But so finally at the end of the day, I thought I got to write something back. And I wrote him. And then he said, well, what is your number? And then he called me. The phone rings 1 minute later and the rest is history. So that was 12 years ago.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
thank you. So I ran the retreats, and then I think probably helping him a little bit with content submission. I would just send I had to stop the retreats because we then went traveling. So I wasn't doing my retreats, and it was the first time I think since honestly, since I was, babysitting, that I wasn't working. I'm always, working. So I had taken a little time off and was traveling with Joe to different events where he spoke. And I think it rubbed off on me, the people having their websites. And I thought that Health Nut News would be a fun site to begin. That would be, lighthearted and maybe have information on like antioxidants in your blueberries, that's why I had such a lighthearted, funny, clever, I thought just a cute name. So little did I know, then it quickly became more serious, especially with, as you know, some of these were your friends and colleagues, the holistic doctors, starting with Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet in June of 2015, who started dying. Sometimes we had 2 or 3 within a day or so, sometimes 3 in one day. And I just was on that Father's Day weekend, June 2015, that we lost 3. All from this area. And I just wrote a story because I thought that when Washington Post and some of the other papers were writing stories and calling them like the quack, the quack commits suicide. And I'm thinking, how could they know this was they found the body yesterday? How could they already know it's suicide? He was found in the middle of a river. So I just thought, I want to do a fair piece that just tells the actual factual information that we know about his death. And I never wrote about that kind of stuff in my life, and did not expect so many people to read it. And then actually it was so disconcerting at first that I told Joe, Dr. Mercola, Joe, I said, I can't write about these anymore. I think guessing you're like this kind of an empath. And I talked to the family members, like Dr. Gonzalez's wife, Mary Beth, and some of the others. And I got so emotional, but Joe said, he doesn't give me a lot of advice, he's so busy himself, but he said, I would keep doing it. We've got, then like you near the beginning, I know, Mitch Gaynor, and when he was found, I just had to, I felt like it was some odd kind of calling because they no longer had a voice. So I don't mean to get emotional. I can't believe I talk about this a lot and usually don't, but they no longer had a voice, Anne, and they were no longer with us. And some of the families were scared. And I just felt that I was just going to keep writing just the factual information, like with whatever subject I'm tackling, that about what happened and what the facts were. And I think
so this has been going on since 2015.
Yeah, we'll come up this summer on 6 years and well over 100 holistic doctors, most of whom were holistic, and many who were in our circle, so to speak.
Yes.
And people get confused. I know there's always the naysayers. They said, well, they probably took their own, crazy stuff. Like they took their own supplements when they had cancer. I'm like, no, there are not, there's no one here who had cancer. We're not including long-term illnesses. We only do, like established homicide or alleged suicide, or, a kind of a strange or sudden death or accident. I mean, it's not, we might do a tribute or pay homage to a doctor who, had an illness and then passed away. But we're just including.
So that is really how you kind of broke onto the scene. I mean, I started following that, started hearing about it. And years ago, Erin, there was a tape that was circulated. It was about dead doctors don't lie. And I kept thinking to myself, she's come up with this concept and it's applied now to real life. Dead doctors don't lie. So the point being is, do you think there's a connection between all of these untimely deaths?
Well, this kind of what I've formulated now. I mean, but it's just the truth. It would appear, I don't know if they're all connected. I'm sure that some are just coincidence, that those do exist in the world, but I can't, and I can't say all are, but I definitely can't say that none are. I think that some would appear to have a connection. I don't know. The details, and I haven't solved it. I don't know who, if it was, if they were, if it was a homicide with a number of these cases. I don't know who did it, but yeah, I would say that I do think there is a connection, just with the strange, when you go down the rabbit holes of some of these stories. It's just remarkable in a very sad way. Just, I mean, where it's just almost it's unbelievable. And the families, so many of the families don't believe that their loved one was, took their own life, or just had this strange accident, and there's no there's no brake marks and marks for the brakes of the car, one that went off a cliff, things like that. They just don't believe, they don't believe the.
So what would the connections be? I mean, you can talk about it, I think, in a very general way. Are there any themes that they all delved into that would connect their untimely demises?
That's asked a lot. I think that they would question the conventional, the conventional methods. Pharmaceutical companies, they may delve more into integrative, holistic practices. A lot of them were getting patients better who were very ill, and helping them overcome autoimmune illness, or cancer, or other ill diseases. And so they were better. They were even some who were more integrative, that may use some conventional techniques, but they were still more holistic minded. And or those doing cancer, a lot of cancer research ones on there. Some that were.
Who are those? I know about Nick Gonzalez, who was an associate and a friend, and Mitch Gaynor, who I met on many, many occasions. He was a psychiatrist, if I'm not mistaken.
I did not realize that Mitch. I know that he, from what I understood, or I believed he was an oncologist or treating cancer patients, but he may have actually been a.
I think so. I just know he did a lot of work with music, and he was an absolute.
Oh yes, that's a good, yeah. And he'd been on Dr. Oz's show. Mitch had been on Dr. Oz twice, and just sent Joe and me copies. We had just talked to him, sent us, just through the email, copies of his new book coming out. But yes, he was very into the whole sound healing with sound, which had become, just more and more popular. And I mean, to be able to go, I think Dr. Mehmet Oz was a close friend of his, from from what he said as well. And I don't know if he was somehow a threat because of that, but it would seem that could be, that could be the
And
case.
what is the story behind Nick Gonzalez? Did they? He was pretty healthy. I don't understand what happened to him. Did we find anything from the autopsy?
Yeah. So his wife, who is an amazing woman, Mary Beth, who I met sometime, I think it was at that same. I feel like the first time was the same event where I met you, but it was a year or two before that. And she just, I think, well, yes. So at first they did say, we believe it is, must have been a heart attack, because why else would someone just die so suddenly? Although that didn't seem to fit. He had just recently had, I think, like so many of these doctors, had a full physical, was healthy. And so, yes, the autopsy showed his heart, his heart appeared great. No surprise, he took great care of himself, was only in his early 60s. And so they don't know. And so she has been pretty open. I think I interviewed her one time, kind of an impromptu at an event, and we did a little interview sitting together. But she has been very open that they don't know. They're still, I mean, they can save tissue samples in case later there are ways that, new ways to discover, was he given something? I mean, but she hasn't said that, but they don't know. It's an unknown cause of death. So that's
what a loss.
Yeah, I mean, he really was a remarkable man. And again, that, and she said this, and others have said this as well, that the church in New York was literally packed full of his former patients, which that itself might seem really nice, but many of whom were they were, and I'm just off the top of my head here, so, but bear with me, but they were pancreatic cancer patients who he had got put into remission 20 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, still in remission, where they had been given literally less than a 5% chance to live, as you know about pancreatic cancer. And so they made these remarkable recoveries, and were that, it was really emotional for so many of them, because he was getting people better and had practiced under Dr. Kelly, an
Whom
extraordinary.
I was going to work with many years ago.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
Gosh.
I'm very familiar with William Donald Kelly. He was a very eccentric orthodontist in
Yeah.
Dallas who did some very unusual things. And my teacher, Dr. Hazel Parcells, cured him of pancreatic cancer.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
circle really becomes
Yeah. It's
all
just,
around.
it does. And then now I was trying, while I'm talking, I'm trying to type it in because I didn't have it in front of me, but so we lost in Dr. Bradstreet, of course, who was working with autism patients and using he was, well, not in the States, but he had to travel overseas because, of course, the FDA made it illegal for a doctor to treat patients within the US, but was using GC-MAF, which was helping with cancer patients and autism patients. So, when Joe and I were speaking at it, we try to do things like we spoke at the local health food store just to help them out. And they asked us, would we speak? And they had it outside. We couldn't fit everybody inside. And afterward, one of Dr. Bradstreet's patients came up, well, I should say the mother of one of the patients, and she explained how he treated her child who was severely autistic, however that it was born that way, I don't know, but she just said he was nonverbal, is 3 or 4 years old. And it was just such a moving story. And we didn't realize for a minute, there's a kid like your typical, young teenage, maybe he's 14, 15, like kind of folding his arms, rolling his eyes. He's bored, sitting there forever. And finally, she goes, oh, and this is him now, and we just looked, and he's like, hi. He's like, Mom, can I go over and look at the such and such, can I go in the school?
Oh,
And he's doing great. He's in the honor student. And it was just, that
what
was
a testimony.
yeah. And that she had, because why was she there? Because we're pretty open about being Volusia County on the East Coast of Florida. And he practiced for a number of years in Melbourne, in the Melbourne area, just an hour away. So she drove from Melbourne to see us speak, and then bring her son, who I'm sure was thrilled sitting through all these long talks at 14 years old. But yes, he had been a patient at Dr. Bradstreet's, and he had gone from nonverbal, very low functioning, if I may use that, but now doing just perfect. He just really was able to transform and save her child. So it was a very emotional moment. And, but your 14-year-old boy was tired of, after 2-3 hours of sitting there listening to a couple of speakers, having to have his mom tell the story, probably embarrassed. But yeah, that was just a beautiful thing. And I was able to interview Dr. Bradstreet's family as well, who maintain that he did not stand out in the middle of a river, balance himself on a raging river, balance himself on the rocks, and take his own life. And then I did a show for Discovery Channel with a Dr. Michael Archer, who has become a good friend of Joe's and mine. He's a Yale graduate, PhD, forensic scientist, and I forget what his master's is, but he is. He was on the show and explained how forensics showed the town was only 12,000 people. They were up in North Carolina. He was meeting his wife for like a getaway weekend kind of thing. And it was just impossible. It was too far range. He couldn't have held the gun far enough away to have the forensics showed it was homicide. But initially, when you have a small town of 12,000, we know they have they're kind of overwhelmed. They just ruled it. They ruled it incorrectly. So initially, but unfortunately, that's what makes the headline news. And then you don't hear later
the retraction.
Yeah. So it was
the one that I was so upset about was this Anne Baroche.
Oh yes, yeah, beautiful.
She had written a book. She had overcome multiple sclerosis, as I recall. Had written a book about Candida. I had just done a forward for one of her cookbooks. What was the story about that, my dear?
That was such a tough one. And I think she and I were similar ages, and they even got our pictures confused. It was so what happened with her, it was, this is an emotional one, but so initially we didn't know what happened, just that she'd passed away. And on her page, the family announced that it was a sudden she had a sudden illness and then a sudden death. So I understood, okay, that happens. But she was young and had overcome multiple
So much,
sclerosis,
so much.
healthy. So then what happened with that, and I feel for her family, they were very sweet. But what happened then is not me, because actually I was so much going on. I didn't know that the autopsy was done, and then that was released by she was in Los Angeles, so that was released in LA. And then one of the sites, then this is again, my site was supposed to be about antioxidants and and smoothie recipes, and so
But it had a mind of its, it had a
yeah, it had a mind of its own. Yeah.
So
So this other site, and it had the word death in it. I have to look it up, but they were a crime site that are, known, and I think maybe out of LA. And so they posted her autopsy. So it said cause of death, it was hanging by suicide, which it was in the garage from what I understand. So then I was like, oh boy. So then because initially I did what we were talking about earlier, just an homage or tribute, and said she passed away. The family quoted the family, and just, didn't, I could later put her, as sad as it sounds like, in the unintended series, but I just did an article in tribute, and then that it was a sudden illness. But then people were like, no, here's the autopsy, and it was by death by hanging. So I was like, oh my gosh. Then the family wrote me and they said, can you, well, I don't know if I saw that yet. They asked, can you help us? They're also, before I knew the autopsy, they said, can you help us? They're thinking it's not a natural death. And so, and they even went as far as to say it was an aneurysm. I felt so bad for her, but why they said this, that the family said, was because, or people that were writing me saying they were her family, but I checked out their profiles. I believe it really was. They felt it would harm her legacy if it was a known suicide. But when I looked it up, like so many others, she was in the garage, found, but so many are found either like Dr. Mitch Gaynor, outside of the house or outside of an alarm system. Like that's what gets me. Most people don't have their garage on an alarm system. So there were others like that. And when I would talk to the family, they'd say, yeah, well, no, that was not they were outside. They're found outside, and correct. That would not been, they couldn't have set the alarm for that area they were found in, which makes me suspicious. Like, why did they go outside? I mean, and maybe that happens, but we have so many cases where they were on the property outside in the back, and that's where they chose to do it. It's difficult for me to believe, just like with,
how many do you have now of these mysterious doctors' deaths? And they're not just doctors, they're activists, aren't they?
well, I'm starting a separate list for that. So I don't have activists on the holistic doctor death series, but we have over 100, and I think we're up to about 105 on the holistic doctor series.
Oh my goodness.
And the activist I'm just starting to put together, because, oh my gosh, we've lost so many, including a Brandy Vaughn, who was 44, died suddenly. Her son went out to walk the dogs and came back. Now, she hadn't been feeling good for a day or two, but initially they were saying, some friends were saying, well, she thought it was gallbladder, but at this time we have not been told anything that it's anything to do with the gallbladder, and they expect any day for toxicology reports to come back and see what happened. But the thing with Brandy Vaughn was she, and I knew her, I posted a few interviews of us together in person, and we met a number of times over the years, and we're friends, not dear friends, but she was definitely a friend and colleague. The thing that was different about her is she posted, like others in the series, well, in the doctor series, she wasn't a doctor, but activists and doctors had said, if anything happens to me, and she said, if anything happens to me, I want an investigation done. I'm healthy. She said, I've had a full health check. And actually her own doctor came forward, her own physician, licensed physician in California, who treated her and said, I treated her for however many years. Her gallbladder she had no issues with her gallbladder. And usually it's not sudden death by gallbladder. It could happen, no doubt, but it's not usual. So we have another one who was just very, very outspoken in natural health, to say the least. Brandy was really just a real activist. And so we're still, that one we're still waiting on. But yeah, with the activists, I should say, that maybe holistic isn't the right description for them. I don't know if we have 100, but I'm trying to now, I probably should have categorized them as I did the stories over this last 7 years I've had the site, but I think we have 100 of those as well. And I just, as sad as it is, I feel it's important to just get the word out there, especially because she was so vocal about, and her house had been broken into. She did do videos showing, hello, my home was broken into, this happened, that, and this was stolen, and showed all the video footage and explained that she was safe. She wouldn't take her life. She was 44 years old, fit, beautiful, fit, no, from what I understand, no pre-existing conditions. And her dear friends, including those who are running her nonprofit that carries on in her honor, that they just said they were just shocked. One had just spent Thanksgiving with her. This just happened. She passed at the beginning of December, but 9 days prior, she had been driven across, made a big long road trip with her son, who is left behind, but will be with, surviving relatives, including the father, but she wasn't married at the time, but she was divorced. But that, it's very sad, unfortunately, that we have several of those. One of the holistic doctors, James Weiner out of Pennsylvania, the last post he ever made was my stories about the holistic doctor deaths, and was found traveling here. He was in Pennsylvania. All of them were extraordinary people and well-loved. He was down here traveling, and they found him on the sidewalk, just no identification, didn't have it in his pocket, and non-responsive. He was one of the few that actually made it to the hospital. But I don't know, the very last post he ever made was, and interestingly, some of them also, like Brandy, didn't have a lot of surviving family members. Her parents passed away. And with Dr. Weiner, he was not married, no children. His parents had passed away, but he was still relatively young and healthy. So just strange stories like that, how he ended, he goes to visit Florida, I think a vacation for a few days, and ends up found on the sidewalk with no ID. I mean, it's just some of them.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So I know that
it's just unbelievable.
And I think, and I really appreciate you allowing me to share that, because I'm sure some of your audience have heard about those. And one thing I find that, people would, as I'm sure, with a big audience, when you have some people may disagree on things, but as I was saying to you just before we went on, I think that with the doctors, everybody's pretty like-minded, that they really know the great work they did and want to figure out what the heck really happened. So I just think it's, and we've lost a few even recently. So just the strangest stories. One was just a chiropractor allegedly killed another chiropractor, and they said, well, he was jealous of his practice. And this
was in Idaho?
Yes, that one was in Idaho,
where I live.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Oh, that's where oh my gosh.
The chiropractor whom I was going to see, but he was killed. Yes, that's the one.
Yes, so we
should. A very, very well-liked chiropractor, as I recall.
Yes, and we don't, so this is a first for us, did one chiropractor take the other chiropractor's life?
That's the story. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I would be curious to see what will happen with that. I don't, of course, innocent until proven guilty. So we'll see what kind of evidence they have on the other chiropractor, who also people will send, you see pictures of him all around his staff and them all, with him. And he was well liked by some as well. So I just don't know what the heck to think. It's just, again, there's so many strange cases lots of medical doctors too, as we were talking about, but I included DCs, so doctor of chiropractic, MDs, DOs, and a couple PhDs, which I thought twice about, because they're not, they're not physicians who are going to see patients, but some of their work was just pretty astounding what they were researching. Different cancer researchers, a stem cell researcher, a lot of them for cancer, and reversing disease, and
so they were kind of alternative cancer.
Yes, especially like the stem cell. And he was the head of the whole, I believe, a whole stem cell of either a clinic or organization in the United Kingdom. We didn't have many overseas, and I'll admit that, I mean, we would investigate any story sent to us, but it did seem to center in the US, and people could say, well, I'm in because I'm in the US, that's what I'm going to hear about. But we had readers all over, and it was mostly US, Canada, a couple, and the island of Grenada. I always say it wrong because we have a street Grenada here. I think it's Grenada, but the island, and there were two on this tiny little island. One of holistic doctors walking with his wife, and a man came with a giant sword at him on the beach, and so he survived. She didn't. She was also in holistic medicine.
Oh
so
my God, what stories!
yeah,
You should write a book about this.
yeah. We were going to do a show. Well, I won't say who, but there was a publisher who offered me a book deal, and then oddly enough, I was signing it and I had the deal, and then they said that they couldn't do it, and it was really strange. And I was offered a show by a network, but then that's the beginning of last year, 2020.
Then they rescinded.
Well, the pandemic happened, and they didn't. That one did rescind. I had a pretty big company out of LA, production company who's made a number of hit TV shows. But I was fearful. I admit that I was always a little fearful at doing a show. I mean, I was like putting contracts. I don't want to be paid or if I paid anything, it's going to go into the foundation for the doctors. But I realize now, Anne, that may be the only way you get a show on a network to get the darn word out. Yeah, it's just, I mean,
you've got to make people aware. This is such a tragedy. And then there's another tragedy in the making, and that is the censorship of some of the alternative sites. Before we let you go, and I know your time is so valuable, can you touch on that a little bit? What's going on in the age of COVID?
Sure. Well, we have the Facebook, which it's unfortunate. I think we're all on there sometimes, at least I am, because sadly I put my eggs in one basket and kind of built up a few pages there. There's a couple million folks on all those pages. So I am just kind of handcuffed to Facebook at this point, and they knock wood, they haven't taken me down yet. But these Facebook fact checkers that Facebook hired, and they're also on Instagram. So those are two of the biggest sites on the internet for social media.
Does Facebook own Instagram, by the way?
Yes, they do. So they bought them out. I'm not sure what year, but it was public, and so they do own Instagram. And then when they said they took Bobby Kennedy's big page down, his personal page with almost 1 million followers, they said they weren't going to take his Facebook page down at this time. So it's a little, who knows how the method to their madness. But the Facebook fact checkers are hired. Facebook pays them, but then you look on their websites, and Bobby's page, before it was taken down, talked about this, and I have researched it as well. They say right on there, several of them are funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. So I don't know what their name means to your audience.
Has to do with it. It means quite a bit.
Yeah. So we were just like, really, it's the Gates Foundation that's funding, that they admit they take these big grants, and then by Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so the last one we had said that some of them are about controversial things, but I'll just tell you this one we just did. It was a meme we posted. Sometimes we do lighthearted stuff, hoping to just stay on social media because we don't want to lose that huge reach. It's a lot of people, and we're able to help a lot of people. So we posted a cute meme that somebody from, I don't know how it came about that we got it, but it was the apples hung along a fence in Norway. And they said, this is a practice people will do in Norway where they will give apples away. They have extra ones. Apples, I guess, are big. They're kind of like in Washington State or something. So they fact checked us, and they said, well, this was one lady. Well, of course, only one person can take a picture so she said she gave some apples away that she hung on the fence, but it's not custom in Norway. Not everybody does it. We didn't say everyone does it. We said, look, so they actually gave us oh yeah. And we wondered if it was because they're fearful about people kind of growing their own food, sharing food, which I think there's some even censorship on that about people that want to homestead, or maybe we are sort of off the grid, and that we have solar panels. We are growing our own food. Joe has chickens. I don't eat. I mean, not he doesn't. It doesn't eat them. Just he eats the eggs. And I'm kind of allergic. I don't eat the eggs, but he has pastured, healthy, happy chickens, and we have, but they're kind of his. I call them his chickens. And growing our own food. And of course, we have the rain. We have the big containers. I'm suddenly drawing a blank, but for the rainwater. So we are able to collect rainwater and all that. And even that kind of stuff seems controversial online, just talking about growing your own food or maybe being off the grid or homesteading, or some people are, whether they're in a residential neighborhood or on acreage, that they can kind of live, that they can homestead their property, even with just a front and backyard, maybe at least turning the backyard into a garden, where people are, and even in Southern California or Idaho, I'm sure as well, they're growing a lot of their own food. So that's frowned upon. So it's very sad. I just think that everyone, no matter what wherever they're from or their politics, they can agree that the censorship about natural health or growing your own food or even the holistic doctor deaths shouldn't be suppressed. So
I so agree. Now, how are people going to contact you, Erin Elizabeth? Where are they going to find you?
My site, as funny as the name may seem, is healthnutnews.com.
It's adorable. I love it. Healthnutnews.com.
Yes, and they can there, if they just right at the top of the page, if they would like, they can get on the our newsletter, because we believe, and I encourage people like with yours to get on yours as well. They probably already are, but we believe that we have to go a little bit old school, so to speak. So we think it's important for people who follow you or me or other public figures that they would they want to get on the newsletter, just in case any of our social media platforms were taken down or people just leave those platforms. And I think it's always good to keep a lifeline. That's what I say. So we have, it talks a little bit about some of the things that I share now that are a little more not as controversial, about like growing your own food and all that. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just making videos of showing what we're growing and things like that. But also we share a lot more important information just besides growing food. And also there's a book that I give away on there as well. So they can go to Health Nut News to find
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. And you too. I'm really, as you know, really love you and your work, and grateful to be on your show and share this with your audience.
Oh, such a sweetheart. So I want to thank you, Erin Elizabeth. Thank my listeners for tuning in yet once again to First Lady of Nutrition podcast. Take a peek at the unityhealth.com site. Their product BioBuilder was just featured in a Woman's World article with a woman that healed her fatty liver with BioBuilder. So on that note, I'll say goodbye, good luck, peace, shalom, love you all. Hi, everybody. I'm Louise here with just one more thing. Thank you so much for being a fan of my work. And if you like this video, please check out all my other videos. Please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications.